Right. Well, hello and welcome everyone. If it's okay with you, we're going to just mute you for a little while, and then later on we'll speak again. I'm Jenny Nemko, the founder of TalkMatters, and I'm really pleased that you're here today for our first webinar for the organizations that are presented and promoted by TalkMatters. TalkMatters has really got two purposes. We're raising awareness in the faith and non-faith UK communities of the good work that's going on here in the UK and in Israel-Palestine that really is so rarely spoken about here and little is known about. And also what we're doing here is acting as a forum for you guys so that your work can be promoted and so that you can also share ideas, be in an area of cooperation rather than competition, so that we can confront some difficult issues that you have as well. So it's twofold. One, to raise awareness amongst the UK public of the work that you're doing, and two, to act as a forum for you all to join together and to exchange ideas and to learn from each other. We are not fundraising, but what we do is promote your newsletters, your interviews, anything that you think that could help your organization. We'll put it on the website. We'll always put your website down we'll reference you so that people can then get in touch with you and support you directly. So that's really what we're up to. And before I introduce you to Dr. Jack Omer-Jackaman, just a few housekeeping points. This meeting is going to be recorded because quite a few people have asked to see and hear it, and it will be published on the website and social media. So if you're not happy with that, then you'll need to turn your camera off if that's not okay with you. And also to say that we'll be finished by 6:30 at the very, very latest. And now to Jack. Jack is a historian of Zionism and the Anglo-Jewish community here in the UK. His doctoral research and subsequent book explores the relationship of the Jewish community in the UK and in the state, the relationship between the community in the UK and the state of Israel. And I've read it and I can say it's amazingly accessible and yet really nuanced, and it's full of interesting Anglo-Jewish history. Jack is the director of Oasis of Peace UK, and Oasis of Peace is the charity that works with the educational institutions of Neve Shalom Wahat al-Salam in Israel. And I would say equally important to me, Jack's been really supportive of TalkMatters, and he's an invaluable soundboard for me. Right, that's it from me. Over to you, Jack.
Thank you, Jenny. That's lovely. Hello, everybody. I'm delighted to be here doing this afternoon. I'm going to talk a little bit about the challenges of working on Israeli-Palestinian issues, specifically in the UK. It's not a talk or a presentation. These are just some thoughts of mine on the issue that I hope will provoke our discussion. As Jenny mentioned, I'll speak for about 15 to 20 minutes and then we'll throw it open. Because of that, I'll speak kind of in broad strokes. A lot of the things I will spend 10 seconds on are things that could justify an hour's conversation. So they're in broad strokes. Jenny spoke a little bit about my background and on my research. And so yes, although I work on the conflict and I've taught it at universities here in the UK, my specific expertise really is in how Israel and its conflict with the Palestinians plays out in the British context. So it's that I'm going to focus on. There are bound to be aspects of what I say that you might disagree with or that runs contrary to your experience. That's good, that's fine. I don't present these thoughts as facts, they're simply my opinion and experience. When I was thinking about the challenges that we're facing today in this field, I kind of grouped them into three types. economic challenges, political challenges, and what I'll call cultural challenges. The economic and the political can be dealt with quite quickly, I think, and they could equally be applied to those working in areas other than Israel-Palestine in the UK. If at the moment or anytime over the last kind of 15 years, if you're involved in work that's to do with raising money, then you're to some degree at the mercy of the economic climate that's been here in the UK for some time now. For as long as I've been doing this work, we've been in the kind of post-Brexit era of economic uncertainty, aversion to risk, caution, essentially. I've already seen as well that the COVID situation is resulting in much more of a domestic focus from some donors and some larger donor bodies. That they're prioritizing their funds more towards UK services, particularly frontline services, for understandable reasons. On the kind of large P political level too, although the government assures us that UK will continue to be outward looking, I think there's no doubt we have become a little more insular in terms of our priorities, that we've retreated somewhat from what many would consider our responsibilities. You can see that most clearly recently with the merging of the Department of International Development with the Foreign Office, as well as the policy change that British aid from here on in should bring about some tangible benefit to the UK. It's a big change in aid policy. So these are just briefly some economic and political challenges which I think are not going anywhere anytime soon. But it's the kind of third group that concerns me most and that I'll talk about most, what I call the cultural challenges. Explain what I mean by this. I mean the culture that surrounds discussion of Israel-Palestine in the UK. It's a very important topic. It's my kind of obsession. It's also a topic, I think, of surprisingly high national importance. By national, I mean British. This can often really surprise observers from other countries, not least Israel. And if you told me 10 or so years ago when I first started working on this topic, that Israel-Palestine would become one of the most kind of potent symbols for wider culture wars, for want of a better term, in the UK, then I too would have been very surprised. If you told me then it would tear apart one of the two biggest political parties in this country, for example, play a huge part in its most recent electoral defeat, I wouldn't have believed you again. The proportion of the UK which is actively interested in Israeli-Palestinian matters, to the extent that they're prepared to give time or money, it's obviously relatively small. For most Britons, and this is a big generalization, but Israel and Palestine are, quoting Chamberlain, faraway countries of which we know little. Bizarrely, however, despite this fact, Israel-Palestine is actually a huge issue in British political, small p political life. Why? Because even though the interested group is small in numerical terms, its members are obsessional when it comes to Israel-Palestine. It's a really big priority for them. Superficially, this might sound like no bad thing for those of us working in the field, right? I work in what should be a niche issue, and yet you have a disproportionately large pool of interested people. However, and this is the key point, of that population of interested people, engaged people, the proportion of them who approach the issues with nuance, who are open to dialogue, who are committed to hearing both narratives and to the national well-being of both Israeli Jews and Palestinians, in other words, those people who are constructive, is, in my opinion, tiny, far, far too small. Our challenge, the thing to which several of us here are devoting our lives, is to grow that pool of people. Now, this either means getting the uninterested to be interested, or, much more difficult, changing the interested but partisan people into people who can see both sides. Because at the moment, and this is a bold claim, but I think you can back it up, I would argue that perhaps second only to Brexit, Israel-Palestine and the surrounding issues is possibly the most entrenched, polarized issue in this country. It's an extraordinary thing. Most of those people interested in the issue have chosen their side, have demonized the other side and shout very, very loudly indeed. A complicated and tragic situation requiring mutual compromise has become for them what is known as a zero-sum game, in which I only win by causing the other to lose. Not only do I think this means they're incredibly unhelpful in terms of aiding those in Israel and Palestine trying to find a solution, it's also poisonous, it's toxic. The people I'm talking about have become so sure of their position, and it's come to stand for so much of their identity that they are prey to the worst kind of hateful bigotry and conspiratorial thinking. Nor, I'm afraid, are these people confined to obscure online forums and the murkier corners of political activism. We know all too well that they can occupy powerful, respectable positions. Take a quick look at the Twitter pages of some very prominent UK people, and you will see depictions of Arabs and Palestinians that belong at a far-right rally. Take a look at some others, and you'll see things that would not be out of place in the protocols of the Elders of Zion. It is that bad here. I want to tell you a couple of anecdotes to illustrate the type of thinking I'm referring to, that I'm arguing is widespread. The first one in which I was involved personally, I was on the Tube, the London Underground train about a year ago, struck up a conversation with an older guy, very friendly, gregarious. He was fascinated by my research and we had a nice conversation. He then asked me what I was currently working on, what I did. I told him I worked for an organization supporting peace and dialogue between Israeli Jews and Palestinians. The smile vanished and he embarked on a ferocious rant of anti-Arab racist hate and invective lasting several minutes. This is on a crowded train in London with carriages full of a very diverse range of people. The second anecdote occurred in circles far higher than any I mix in. Several years ago, the French ambassador to the UK was attending a dinner party of London's great and good, at which he was heard to speak of Israel as, you'll have to pardon my quoted language, that shitty little country. The anecdotes are unpleasant enough on their own, but that's not the point. My point is that in both instances, the offender saw nothing wrong in expressing those views and indeed felt they were entirely safe in doing so. In other words, we're talking about a partisan culture in which hatred and generalization are far too often the norm. I could have chosen literally hundreds of examples to illustrate the same point, both from my own life and from the wider culture. How did it get like this? That's a longer conversation, which I'm happy to have with any of you when time allows. Jenny can share my email. I'm always happy to talk about these things. Some of it is circumstantial and to do with changing Israeli-Palestinian realities. As the occupation and the suffering of the Palestinians continue year on year, and as the threats to Israeli security diversify but do not decrease, hearts get hardened and minds closed. Similarly, as Israeli politics and society has moved further rightward, or at least have seemed to do so, so have sections, and I emphasize that word, sections, of the quote-unquote pro-Israel community here. But it's far more than this. For reasons having to do with changes in left-wing thinking that began in the late 60s, the Israeli-Palestinian issue has become a key identity marker, what some people pejoratively call a virtue signal, for the worldview of many on the left. The last few years have made it newsworthy, but it's been going on for a long time. Hatred of Israel, not reasoned criticisms, which Lord knows there are enough you can make, but hatred of Israel and a wish to see it disappear is a shibboleth for a certain school of left-wing thinking, in which Israel stands not just for itself, but for imperialism, neoconservatism, capitalism, military-industrial complex, a whole host of things. It's a conspiratorial worldview. In response to the growth in visibility of these ideas and their place in some political parties, the pro-Israel constituency becomes more ostensibly right-wing, more rejectionist, more resistant to criticism of Israel. Bizarrely, it also results sometimes, I think, in a situation in which this kind of proxy war in the UK can sometimes be more restrictive to debate than the culture in Israel and Palestine themselves. In my experience, many times over, it's often easier to have a conversation critical of Israel in some way with a Jewish Israeli than with a pro-Israel supporter in the UK. And it's often easier to have a conversation supportive of Israel or critical of a Palestinian position with a Palestinian than with a pro-Palestinian supporter in the UK. So the challenge for us, or for me, is how to operate within this culture. How do we expand our constituency of people committed to both peoples, to hearing both narratives, to peace? How do we make our voice heard above all this noise? The short answer is only through education and concerted effort, in my view. Be interested to hear from you. I think we also have to acknowledge that a different challenge comes not from anyone's bad intentions or lack of education, but from fatigue and exasperation. This conflict is now at least a century old, the occupation 53 years old, and to many, it seems as far from resolution, further perhaps than ever. The optimism of the Oslo years seem a long time ago. For some people, this leads to a sort of unspoken sense that conflict is the natural state of affairs in Israel and Palestine, and that nothing can be done to end it. It's what you might call the problem of diminished expectations. I think we also, and this is really important and something I struggle with, need to consider that the paradigm through which we've spoken of a potential peace and tried to educate people has shifted possibly forever. The two-state solution has for so long been the lens through which we've tried to discuss this issue and to educate people. And even those of us who cling to it are forced to consider whether its moment has come and gone forever. Again, this is a longer conversation, but it's something that needs careful consideration. I think it's also important to note that in some quarters, of potentially really receptive, good people, there is a fear of engaging with the issue. Fear of negative publicity, but also of actual safety sometimes. And as I say, this can mean that for potentially friendly audiences avoid the issue. I spoke with the president of a Jewish society at one of the major UK universities, last year. And I asked if I could come and speak about Neve Shalom. And he told me that the society had a blanket no Israel discussion policy. This is a Jewish society. But their fears are understandable. In 2016, for example, my old college, King's College, held an event with Ami Ayalon, the former head of the Shabak. It turned very violent and frightening. And this was for an event with Ami Ayalon, hardly a Likudnik. In fact, someone who then at least had a great many critical things to say about Israeli policy. Similarly, I've seen events with perfectly moderate Palestinian speakers disrupted in a very intimidating way. So with each one of these things, I think it creates a bit more reluctance for people to engage with the issue. Because I focused on these challenges, it's all been quite negative and pessimistic about this, working on this issue in the UK. I do apologize for this, especially at a time when we all need some cheer. But let me be clear, these challenges don't mean we should give up or be intimidated. They in fact mean the exact opposite. That we need to work harder and smarter in supporting the organizations that Jenny has gathered together. It's why what Jenny's doing is so important. Because the debate is too dominated by the forces of rejection and hatred. And we need to amplify other voices. In the UK, we don't and can't solve this conflict. What we can do, and I think not enough people realize this, is contribute to a global culture which can have an impact on the conflict. And it's why I'm very happy to support what Jenny's doing. That's it from me. So unless you want to come back in, Jenny, shall I invite people to undo their mics, or rather turn on their mics, and we can talk. Including your own, Jenny. There we go. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Effie and Nura, can you turn on your mics? Excellent. Okay. Who's first? Warren's just taking a call. We'll have Warren back in a minute.
I think we should also welcome Nura. Hi, Nura.
Hi, Nura.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Aviva has her hand up wanting to say something.
I was just going to ask what you thought the positives were. I mean, obviously there is a sort of slight change in flights from the UAE coming into Israel now. There is maybe there's going to start to be a slight change within the Arab nations, do you think, or some of them?
Well, probably there are few other Arab nations that will join this. Some say happy, some say historic. I don't believe that this will bring the peace. We have to face the occupation and a situation of nobody wants to agree, but apartheid in the occupied territories where two people, you know, in the occupied territories are already illegally Jewish settlements and Jewish population, and two populations that live in the same cell of country, in the same area, and have to abide to a very different kind of legal system and legal regime. This is something that we have to face, and I don't see that it's coming very soon. I'm sorry that I'm pessimistic. I continue to fight for the end of the occupation.
How do you do that, Nura? How do you fight? What do you do?
Well, I belong to few groups that fight the occupation already for quite a time. And we are still in the minority.
So sorry, I didn't understand that. You?
Did you hear about Mahsom Watch? Checkpoint
Yes.
Watch? Did you hear about Yeshdin? Did you hear about the policy working group headed by the former diplomat Ilan Baruch?
No, I don't know.
Those are the groups that I'm working with. Of course, we are in relationship with B'Tselem, with the Forum of Bereaved Parents, the fighters, Israeli-Arabic former fighters,
Combatant for
that are fighters for peace. That's what we can do for now. To continue and believe that at a certain point, the occupation must end.
Aviva, part of what you meant was, are there any signs for optimism here?
Yes.
In the UK? Yes, I think always amongst the young who haven't had time to develop the cynicism, who are a little more open and whose hearts haven't become hardened. I think the signs are always encouraging there. I'm always encouraged when I speak to groups of young people. I think also
when you say that, Jack, you mean Jewish and otherwise?
Yes. I think also the newsworthiness of the issue, the topicality of the issue presents us a real opportunity. Certainly at no time since I've been engaged in these issues has the number of has the ability to grow the pool of interested people been greater. The number of people with no previous stake in this issue who now want to talk to me about it is really different, really different. Before, you know, I'd be at a party and people's eyes would glaze up. They'd ask me, have that moment where you ask what you do, and then it'd be quickly, oh, that's interesting, and move on to it. Now the situation is quite different. People want to talk because of how much it has intruded on domestic British politics. People want to get a handle on it. And those people, although often, you know, they have some ideas that need correcting because they've been filtered through not great sources, they don't bring the baggage to it. So those people are, in effect, they're kind of clean slate. So there is positivity, I think, in that if we can capitalize it on it. But yeah. Michael, what's your experience of these kind of issues in the UK?
Yeah, I'm obviously an outsider from my accent, but I've been in and out of the UK since '95, more out than in. My background, I was an American diplomat, and as someone from outside who has been in and out of the issue, at one point I was the embassy liaison to the ecumenical community and the British Muslim community for 3 years. So that gave me some insights. I think there are two things I'm optimistic about. Maybe more than that. One is I was also very involved in the Good Friday Agreement. And when we got started on that, no one thought it was possible. Everybody said it was centuries old. Nobody would ever change positions. That's the way it was. That's the way it would be. No one would ever forget the Battle of the Boyne. It just was intractable, and at least that was the belief. And yet there was a shift, and it was a shift not, I mean, with the hard work was certainly done by some very, I think, innovative and courageous politicians, but a lot of other people. And then the shift occurred very quickly, and it was people could imagine a life that was different. And once that imagination became palatable, that imaginative future became palatable, things moved at an incredible speed in terms of this shift. Now, it's in a very different situation. I don't want to, too many people draw too many parallels, but I've seen something that shouldn't have happened happen. The other thing, Jack, I agree. I've also seen an enthusiasm and an openness among young people here. I've seen, I think, more educational programs being conducted by organizations like Faith and Belief Forum. But again, my experience here is it's limited. I mean, I haven't been immersed in it in the way that all of you have been for decades.
Okay. Sefi, what do you think, listening to me talk about the UK?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I can only speak. First of all, I'm a beginner. I'm a businessman that recently established Sipur Hikaya, and I'm still a beginner in the peace, in this peace world, or trying to bring peace to the Mediterranean, to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And speaking about what's the right thing to do and what are the possibilities and challenges in the UK, I'm really just a listener. If you want, I can share with you a little bit the vision of my entity, of my organization, I'm happy to do so. But when we speak about the atmosphere in the UK, I'm listening. It's really interesting. I can imagine that there are some challenges sometimes to bring Israeli people. As you said, even if it's Ami Ayalon, it could be a disaster. So if it's okay with Jack and Jenny and all the others, I can a little bit describe Sipur Hikaya. Is it interesting?
Please.
Please do.
So Sipur Hikaya is it comes from my story. I'm a businessman. I established a company selling tickets for sports events and shows called Sports Events 365, established in 2006, and it's a multilingual platform with websites in 22 languages. One of them is Arabic. And I started hiring people not only to manage the Arabic language, but also my CTO was Arab, living in Haifa, not too far from me. I also live in Haifa. And then we had more and more clients, Arabic clients, Arab clients from Nazareth and from Ramallah and from Lebanon and from the Gulf. And at a certain moment, I said to myself, I really need to find time to try and help bringing peace, because it's impossible that we can deal and do business and reach agreements and find compromise whenever we disagree on something. And why can't we do it between Palestinians and Israelis? I started reading books about it. And at a certain moment, I decided, or I realized, I felt that what we really need is more knowledge. I felt that so many people in Israel don't know anything about the Palestinian narrative. I didn't know the word narrative at the time, about the feelings, about the history, about their side. On the other hand, it was clear to me that many Arabs in the West Bank or so on, they don't know anything about the Israeli story. Why do we fight so tough to keep our nation and to fight for our independence, etc. So I started looking for a place to bring my energy, to contribute my energy, and I was exposed to the book. The book is called Side by Side, in English. The Green Book in Hebrew. It's about two narratives. The book describes. I'll describe a few words about the history. It's an initiative made by an Israeli professor from Beersheba and another professor from Bethlehem. And they decided with some European money to try and create one narrative as part of education, as part of being ready for peace. And now let's start and change the educational system, teach people as part of a post-resolution solution. They tried to bring one narrative. It was too difficult. At a certain moment, they decided to write two narratives and to try and put them in one book. They brought one historian from each side, and each historian brought 6 history teachers. And for 8 years, mainly in the summer, they sat down to write a book, 250 pages, describe on the right side of every double page, you have the Israeli narrative and the Palestinian narrative, and there is some empty space in the middle for the pupil to try and solve things, to try and understand what really happens, to try and find a way to understand what happened here and there. So it's of course a description of all the history starting from mid 19th century, the first Zionism movements.
Yes, just excuse me for one comment. The Minister of Education was not ready to let it enter any school.
You know who was the Minister of Education when they tried to bring it into the system? Yuli Tamir. Among all, Yuli Tamir was the Minister of Education. So just to finish, they finished writing in 2008, and then they tried to bring it in to the educational system, but they were refused. Basically, in Israel, they tried here and there to teach it, and they were called for, for hearing. I mean, if you will continue, we will you might be dismissed. And in the Palestinian side, they were just told, don't even dare to try and bring it in. So
the coalition system, yes.
There was no implementation. The money from the EU stopped. And basically, when I met Eyal Naveh, Professor Eyal Naveh, the historian that led this, the Israeli teachers, he told me, listen, we are not doing too much here and there. We are doing some seminars with the circle of families and things like that, narrative workshops and things like that, but very few things. And if you want to try and move things forward, since you are a businessman and you know something about marketing and Facebook, social media and everything, fine, do it. So first of all, I read the book, and then I came back and said, okay, I'm happy to take this book and to try and use it as a platform to move forward and to bring to the attention of many people, youth and adults everywhere, to try and bring to the attention of all of them the dual narrative, this dual narrative method or model. And he brought all the history teachers from Israel, and they said, fine, we are happy to go with you. By the way, we also tried to meet Sami Adwan from Bethlehem. We met him in Beit Jala, and he said, sorry guys, I'm happy that you are moving forward, but I'm not going to join you. I'm afraid from the BDS. Of course, he spoke for half an hour, but in a nutshell, that's what he said. So I decided, okay, I'll try and join some non-profit organizations here in Israel, but somehow it didn't work. So I established a non-profit organization by myself, Sipur Hikaya. And now I'm moving forward. My business is basically down since there are no tickets to sell for matches around the world. The sports travel industry is basically dead. So now I have more time to promote my organization and to take care of all the bureaucracy. And once we have this bank account, I'm going to start moving forward on Facebook. First of all, in Hebrew, soon in English, to try and raise some resources, and then to have also an English site, an Arabic site. First of all, we want to have good exposure in the Israeli site. We want to bring this concept that you have to learn also the narrative of the other side. If we want one day to have peace, we should learn what's the other side. By the way, I forgot to say, one of the first steps or one of the first decisions was that I said to myself that peace between Israel and Palestine has to be what we call hot peace, warm peace. It cannot be a cold peace like we have with Jordan or Egypt. With the Palestinians, since we have all the holy places and water issues and air pollution and one airport and seaport, so many things that can easily cause difficulties and problems and conflicts. So we should strive, we should make our best to create a warm peace, including really friendship and very good relations, etc. So the steps are, first of all, to bring the idea of a dual narrative in the Israeli side. Once we have tens of thousands of Israelis that are happy, part of a community, joining us on Facebook, active, helping to raise money, doing volunteering job, then we can start doing the same thing in the Palestinian side. And hopefully when we have a group of tens of thousands here and tens of thousands there, the idea is to try and push the governments and to start making noise and telling them, come on, time to compromise. And, you know, between me and you, I think we can reach even an agreement of open borders, you know, like French and Spain. I visited the Pyrenees. I was in the north of Spain, and I viewed the French side, and I saw that there is a village there that is still part of Spain in the French part. And, you know, it's in the French territory, but there are some Spanish villages. And when you have open borders, people can live in Spain and go every day through France to Spain for work or anything like that. So I believe in open borders, but that's my personal belief. As Sipur Hikaya, we are just speaking about creating, exposing the people to the idea of, hey, there are two narratives here. Why not to be a bit more open, not to agree with the other narrative, just to have in mind, to have this awareness. That's what they have. That's what they're feeling. These are their feelings, and now we can at least understand why they are unhappy with us, etc. So I hope I didn't speak too long.
No, that's fine. Fantastic. And good luck, Sophie.
Thank you very much.
Rabbi Elf, can I bring you in?
You must. So apologies for the distractions. I'm dealing with two funerals at the moment.
Okay.
One funeral, one impending funeral. So, but yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for the input. It's always good to hear of those of us that are doing what we can to try and bridge the gap, I suppose, to bring people together, to hear, to understand. On one level, I'd like to think that maybe we could actually make a bit of a difference in helping towards peace, and bring, sort of about peace between Israelis and Palestinians, between Israel and Palestine. And the reality is, I'm sitting in England. I'm not there. I'm not living there. I've not served in Sahel. The biggest contribution I can make, I think, is towards the relationships between communities here and how we deal with the Israel-Palestinian question. And I was very fortunate to be roped in or invited onto the very first FODIP study tour to Israel, which is 10 years ago now, I think. And I've been on I've been on 2 and co-led 2 of the FODIP study tours, which try to bring Jews, Muslims and Christians together to explore the issues and to encourage dialogue, discussion, involvement in the issues, and encourage people to be more open, to actually hear that it's not as simple as people understand. And of course, there are lots and lots of people who have lots and lots of ideas, as you said initially, Jack, and as everyone else has said in terms of some of the work going on. There's a lot of resistance. A lot of people think that it's clear, it's straightforward. There's a lot of wrong being done by the Israelis oppressing the Palestinians, or that the terrorism being done by the Palestinians. And when people start to engage in the issues, and FODIP tries to we've set up some conflict resolution stuff. We've run a couple we call tough options programs for young people, and we're looking at involving them now in some more of their ongoing work. And it's been fascinating how people, not just young people, but also people who have quite entrenched positions, have been open enough to listen to others. And what we've found in during the last 6 months, basically we've taken our work online, and we've had a series of 6 seminars that we've run so far, in addition to trying to wrap up the second Tough Options program online and a couple other things. And we try to make sure that there's Jewish, Muslim and Christian perspectives in each of the sessions we do. We've tried to bring together either an Israeli and a Palestinian perspective directly, or at least a Jewish and a Muslim or Jewish Christian, mixed perspectives into the mix, and people can hear how people have come to where they are, and then ask questions. And some of the questions have been quite challenging, and some of the questions have even been quite rude. And yet, the fact that those questions are heard and then answered, I feel has helped move some people, at least in engagement and being willing to listen. And at the moment, we're finding that funding is potentially a major issue, but we're able to carry on, at least in sort of the work we're doing online. That's made it in some ways partly easier. But we've had some people, we've involved people from Chatham House in some of our seminars. We've involved the Campaign for Anti-Semitism and the All-Party and the representatives from the All-Party Campaign Against Islamophobia or Muslim Hate we've looked at Palestinian and Palestinian identity and Zionism recently as well. We also had Sammy's successor at the Holy Land Trust, Elias Days, doing a seminar for us, which we thought we might get some slated about because it was putting one particular perspective over. And as Elias was talking about how he got involved in this, I could feel some of the more right-wing Jewish views thinking, hang on, this guy is not moderate, this guy is not a peace activist, and until he came over and was talking about the fact that he led a group to Auschwitz and he's engaged with the themes, and so there are lots of different perspectives. A couple of contacts from the last seminar that Jenny put us in touch with have led to the possibility of us arranging some more seminars on the back of this as well. So we're constantly trying to find ways of engaging more people, of training more future leaders, and in particular young people, to do some of the work with us and for us, get the message out more. It's interesting because 10 years ago when we came back from the first study tour, a couple of the Muslim members of the group who I've become good friends with said, we must get you into our mosque to talk to some Muslims about this. And I'm still waiting 10 years on because it's not quite right politically or religiously to actually go and confront some of these issues head on yet. So we're trying to find ways of making sure it's not so head on. But yeah, onwards and upwards. I believe this is important work because it affects the relationships between Jews, Muslims and Christians in this country, and therefore community cohesion as well. And ultimately as well, it's in some ways it's countering some of the extremist messages that are out there. And I think we're sort of hoping to find ways of dealing with those as well, and bring people around the same table or screen or whatever it is at the moment to move on.
Absolutely. I think a key point is that people can be brought back from even quite far advanced extreme positions on this topic. Not everyone, and that's the difficulty is in kind of identifying those who can and those who can't, but people can recover from some deeply entrenched and polarized positions. And that is very heartening, and that's what needs to continue. Michael.
No, I was just going to echo that the reason that I'm here is that I'm on the board of the Abrahamic Reunion, which is an older organization in Israel and Palestine that just works on with religious leaders and bringing grassroots organizations together. But here in the UK, we've started to work in some of the prisons, bringing in Jewish and Muslim and Christian speakers. And it's been an interesting place to work because you've got people with some pretty entrenched ideas, which is why they're there. But I've also seen some change, which is heartening. But so anyway, yeah, I think for us in Israel and Palestine, it really is there's a number of things going on, and that one reason I'm so glad Jenny is doing this is to look for people to work with. We are one of our principals is Sheikh Hassan Mansoura, has worked with for years. He's from Nazareth. We also have people in Bethlehem, and so again, building those collaborations is important because we try to work with the Samaritan community and the Druze community, and just getting. One of the things we're involved in now is setting up a series of Zoom conversations explaining the different communities, the Samaritans, the Druze, that people don't always think of. And one of the things we'd hope to do is get a number of the representatives from the different Jewish communities together to talk about the differences between Orthodox and conservative. They won't do it. We found that's more difficult than getting Israelis and Palestinians together to do it. So I think people, they're not aware. There's a lot of issues going on there, and it's not as, as Jack, as you've said, and as Warren and everybody else has said, it's not simple, and there doesn't mean there's not a way forward, but it's not going to be, oh, if people would just not hold a particular position. That's not the key, I don't think. It's talking to each other. That's the other thing that we're very clear about. We take no political position, because our belief is if you can get people to talk together, they will find a way forward. But the hardest part is getting them to actually have those conversations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If I can say, and that's where so many of these organizations come in, because they are enabling Jews and Arabs to talk together on lots of different levels. I mean, we have the Jerusalem Youth Chorus, and they're young musicians, Jewish and Arab musicians coming together. You may know of that. Or issues of ecology. So if we could be as broad as possible in areas that are of common interest to people, then that is a way of getting a Jew and an Arab to talk to each other. And I've seen this so much, having been involved in Neve Shalom Wahat HaSalam so long, in a youth encounter groups, when they have 3-day residential encounters, and the young people to start with are really frightened of each other, and there's an innate hatred in maybe hatred's too strong a word, but there's an innate dislike of the other. But yet, through careful facilitation, they begin to accept each other as human beings. They begin to talk about, oh, we wear the same jeans, we like the same music. That's one way into those people, to those young people. So that's why I believe that talking, you can't change communities, what you're saying about the Jewish community within the Jewish community, but often you meet an Orthodox Jew can meet a Reform Jew, and on a personal level, on some level, they can get on together, and then a conversation can begin. And I think it's the same with Jews and Arabs.
All right. So, and anybody have anything else they'd like to add?
I just want to ask if any one of you is in contact with Rabbi Michael Melchior. Michael Melchior is trying to Mosaic. His organization is called Mosaic, and he's trying to bring together a coalition of rabbis and imams that will push to peace. I think he's working below the radar, but I wondered if he's doing also something with some communities in the UK.
Sophie, perhaps could you put that name in the chat?
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
So that people can.
Yeah, I've come across him, but I haven't met him.
I believe he works,
Does he work?
involved in Mosaic is also Rabbi Daniel Roth, along with faith leaders from of Islam and Christianity as well, whose names escape me. But I think we're going to be having a conversation with him. Whether we get it in before Rosh Hashanah or have to wait till after the Yom Norai remains to be seen. But so yeah, it's one of the areas we were starting to look at. So
yeah, when I listened to you, I was thinking, oh, you might be having contact with him. So it will be true.
Yeah, so Mosaic was one of the groups. The other one was Roots Shorashim, which is also one we've started to look at, and hopefully we'll be using some of them for some of for our seminars over the next few months. So there's quite a lot of good stuff out there. So and we've also used the Parent Circle and Bereaved Families Forum at various stages, and yeah, Rabbis for Human Rights, and sort of a few other groups who we've connected with and are looking to evolve. And of course, as we're all sitting with computer screens in front of us, there are more opportunities for engaging with these people without having to be there face to face or bring them over, pay for the fares and those sorts of things. So,
I realized that the corona has brought a situation where more and people meet more and more people. As one rabbi said in one radio conversation, a rabbi from the US said, Instead of having 25 people in the Beit Knesset, I have now 100 people doing Kiddush on Zoom or things like that. So you tripled, no, times 4.
Nura, can I ask you, Nura, what you think of an organization like Roots that is in the West Bank, Orthodox Jews, working together with Muslims, Palestinian Muslims in the West Bank? What
Roots?
Yes, have you heard of that? Roots?
I'm not familiar.
Jorashim.
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm not
Jorashim.
familiar. I'm sorry, I'm
Hebrew,
not familiar with them.
Okay, because I have had some negative reaction from Israeli Jews about organizations like Roots, and
I think my initial
think
reaction.
that I know quite a bit, but I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with
the idea of normalization, you know, is it right?
yes.
For
The
No,
unique
I
thing
don't
about
know.
Shorashim, they are in the West Bank, although they are in Gush Etzion, which was a place where Jews lived until 48, and you know, somebody said they had also their Nakba. They were sent away from Gush Etzion.
The one thing that I want
1948.
first to tell you is that the Gush Etzion of today doesn't even look like Gush Etzion before 48, which was before 40, until 48, was a small area, maybe third of what is now called Gush Etzion. You see, the political, we are talking about people that talk to each other, people that sort of cooperate, and the political situation is now anti-peace. Maybe the one good thing that came out of the peace with Abu Dhabi is the stop of the possible annexation. But you see, Abu Dhabi was never a fighting force against Israel. We never was, there was no animosity. We were not in war. We don't have a common border. So it's very nice that there are some Arab countries which are not democracies that are in good relationship with us. But we have to solve the political problem of Israel-Palestine. And I don't see how the good relationship, which as far as I follow, much of it is business that relates to arms, selling airplanes, selling arms that will make both sides strong enough for another war. So maybe if I will try to say something which is more in the macro and not in the micro, meeting groups of people, there is a problem, a political problem, a need for political solution, and there is a need for something that will come after the political solution between two sovereign people that will try, and it will take a long time to, the word pious,
Reconciliation.
Reconciliation, yes. political solution is not reconciliation, and reconciliation probably will take another generation that can come out of economic cooperation and social cooperation, music, art, common marketing, and cooperation in doing things, in fighting things that cannot accept borders. We are so, the water problem, the air, clean air, the need for fighting together any kind of sickness. Now, see the endemic now of corona. We cannot just fight the corona in Israel and not relate to the occupied territory. Everything is the land, the water under the land, the air above. Unlike Abu Dhabi, which is quite far away, and what can be done very nicely is to shorten the trips to wherever. So I don't see now in the quite catastrophic situation of the endemic and the economic crisis. Israel is an economic crisis, and Israel is trying to fight a second wave of endemic, which looks, for the time being, quite, I would say, uneasy. In a political chaos, we really don't have a functioning government. We don't have a functioning parliament. So the situation seems very hard, but maybe that this crisis which also woke up not to the question of occupation, but to what is happening in Israel. For the first time, the youngsters are waking up, and the riots every Saturday night and sometimes during the week. For me, I'm probably the oldest in the group that you see here. The fact that so many young people are coming up against the chaos in the government may ruin us, but it may also be the opening of some political change. Because if you look at the political components that at this time are governing the system, you cannot see any possibility, not that it's easy on the Palestinian side, but we are the stronger part of, and I think that from our side, I don't think the political part that will bring us close to a political solution, which from my point of view is really just the opening to a longer process of economic and social cooperation. Yuval, hi.
Good evening, everybody.
Hi to welcome you, Yuval. Hello. Nice to see you.
Hi. Sorry to join the party so late. We had an important meeting at the organization, so only now finished.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Perhaps Yuval, you could respond to some of the things Nora has said, particularly with reference to the parent circle and organizations like that.
I only started to hear Nora from, I think, the middle of what she said, but two things draw my attention. First, Nora was referring to the reconciliation process. And this is something that at the Parent Circle we explore for 20 years. One of the goals of the organization were to design a reconciliation process that will be a part in any peace agreement, because any peace agreement will not be complete without the two parties taking their full responsibility over the reconciliation process, because otherwise it will not work. Nora is completely right. Most of the agreements that were signed so far were not aware of the human side of the fear and hatred that was building for so many years between the parties. And you know, the peace agreement with the Egyptians and with the Jordanians, and now with the Emirate, which is not really a peace agreement, they do not conclude, they do not have a reconciliation component. This is why they're called cold peace. You can take example of the South African model, where part of the peace between blacks and whites were to re-educate the entire nation about the history, and to have those committees of peace and truth, and that will not hide the past but work on reconciliation. And that's one element. And I think one other element that Nora was mentioning is that Israel is the dominant and the powerful party in this conflict. If you compare the budget of the two sides, Israelis and Palestinians, budget of the Palestinian Authority, the GDP, is 5% of Israel's. 5%. This is the balanced power. Israel is 20 times more powerful, and it's not just economical. In any aspect, the social, military, we are stronger. And this is why most of the work that needs to be done in terms of public opinion needs to be done in Israel public opinion, in order to rebuild the Israelis' desire for peace. Israelis now live comfortably without peace. When I was a kid, peace was something that we learned about in school, in elementary school, something that I knew that Israel is the one state that wants peace with the Arabs, and the Arabs doesn't want. And I don't think this is anything that is discussed today in schools. Israeli society, for the most part, is not concerned with that. It is concerned with other things, security, for example, but not peace, because in a way, I think the time that has passed, I don't know, 72 years of the existence of Israel, Israelis are educated that conflict is part of our lives. We never experienced peace. We don't know what it is. I was giving a lecture to a delegation from Sweden and Norway, and they didn't have any war for 400 years. So how can I explain to them how does it feel to be in a daily conflict where every day you have a violent clashes between two nations for 70 years, for more than 70. So this is something that Israelis are very much used to. Of course, when there are more violent periods like wars, and it's more evident. But even now, when there's no special thing, Israelis are still concerned with their security. They're not concerned with peace, and they are not aware of the benefits, the deep benefits that peace can bring. What we are educated on today is the risks that any peace agreement with the Palestinians will bring to Israel. And this is something that we as peace organization need to change.
Okay, thank you, Yuval. Jenny, is there anything else you wanted to add?
I think that the time has come now. I'm afraid, Yuval, that you came in right at the end. I'm really conscious of the time and that we should end in the next few minutes. I think that this has been most worthwhile. I want to thank you, Jack. It was depressing, but it was insightful.
That's what I bring to a party, Jenny. Depressing but insightful. That's why I get all the invitations.
And I hope that we can make some tiny little difference. And I'm convinced what I can do is to bring you guys together to exchange ideas, to collaborate, to help each other in any way that it is possible for your organizations to help each other. And the other thing, as I said, that I really want to do is to let the UK public, starting with the Jewish public, because those are the people nearest to my heart, to know the possibilities of what is going on. Because this morning, for example, I was talking to my optician, and I told him that what I was doing this afternoon, and he said, oh, all the people around here, all the Jewish people around here think Israel's so wonderful, you know, you won't get anywhere with them. And this is the whole thing that we need here in the UK to talk to Jewish people, to help them to understand the two sides, the two narratives. As Sefi's beautiful organization title is Sipur Hikaya, hopefully pronouncing it correctly. So that is just a little something that I'm trying to do via your great work. You're doing the work, and I would like to promote your work and to help you to collaborate. And that is all. I'd like to thank you very much for coming today, and hopefully we will work together again. Thank Jack enormously for coordinating the whole session and for encouraging our discussion so well. And thank Daniel, as ever, for being a brilliant technical support. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
My pleasure.
Bye for now. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you
Thanks
very
very
much.
Thank
Good
you.
thing, everyone.
Wonderful.
Take care.
And you, take care.